letter that had been sent inside the Harris campaign that said, you know, we still believe that there are votes in several places across the blue wall, that when they're counted, we're still confident. As the night went on, did their rhetoric clearly change? When do you think they realized things were going Trump's way?
I'm going to base it off of the conversations that I was having with campaign officials, the communication. There was a steady communication, but it wasn't up until approximately 10 p.m. at night that we stopped hearing from campaign officials. We knew based off of the letter that their only clear path to victory was going to be the blue wall states. But when this wasn't necessarily looking favorable for the campaign, this is when we started noticing that the silence was growing. And we're being asked to step off. For now, Harris is about to take the stage.
Okay, Nydia, sounds good. Thank you. We do want to mention breaking news into our newsroom right now that Alyssa Slotkin has won the Michigan Senate seat there. Of course, the Senate not going the way of the Democrats last night. CBS News has projected that Republicans will maintain control of that.
The House still up in the air, several of those seats, but the Senate race, this is a big one for the Democrats, though they will be officially in the minority. But Slotkin winning this Michigan race. And again, those races, Senate and House, will continue to trickle in. Those votes often do take a few days. But the House is what the Democrats, at least for now, are still hoping for. They believe that they can, in some cases, have control of this, the House and Congress after all of this is counted and all the votes are said and done. Stocks, by the way, on Wall Street are now closed. The Dow finished up over 1,500 points. The S&P and NASDAQ each hit fresh record highs.
Bank stocks were among the biggest risers. Bitcoin also reached a new record high. The last time the Dow finished up more than 1,000 points in a single day was in November of 2022. Let's go ahead and bring in CBS News business analyst Jill Schlesinger for more on today's market performance. Jill, good to see you. Why did the market rally behind news of Trump's nomination? What's behind the enthusiasm?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. There is this idea around tax cuts being extended for individuals. We had the Trump tax cuts in 2017. They went into effect in 2018, but they were expected to sunset or go back to where they were before those cuts at the end of next year. And had Harris won, there was a real conversation about tax rates rising for a lot of Americans who earn more than $400,000. And now with a Trump second presidency, it looks like those tax cuts will become enshrined, at least for the foreseeable future. That's a big boost. There's also an idea around regulation. Now, if you've got lax regulation or maybe a somewhat diminished amount of regulation, as President Trump has argued that he would like, then you see certain sectors really benefit. Think about banking sector. Maybe the regulators say you don't have to keep as much cash on hand. Think about also the oil and gas industry. Those are companies that are potentially going to benefit. So I think lower taxes, less regulation, maybe increased growth, that really argues for a stock market resurgence. Now, it's one day, and this could be a week, it could be a month. When these policies actually are in place, alongside perhaps with tariffs that can be inflationary, things can change really quickly.
Jill, it's that last part I wanted to ask you about because Trump's critics throughout the campaign had said that those tariffs and the hikes in tariffs would lead to further inflation. Are we supposed to read into the stock market performance today that those fears are not being seen right now as far as what President Trump will actually put in place once he is back in the White House?
You know, I just have to say, after doing this for a long time, my first job on Wall Street is I was a commodities trader, and sometimes euphoria and emotions gets the best of everyone, forgetting about the algorithms that make the trades. And I think that there is this generalized sense like it's all going to be great. And you know what? Sometimes that first day reaction is spot on, and oftentimes it's not. And we really need to see what the impact of what proposed tariffs would be. Generally speaking, I think it will absolutely shock consumers if there are broad-based tariffs and the price of goods starts to rise more dramatically. And secondarily, if we have strong growth and we do see inflation stick around a little bit longer, that means the Federal Reserve is not going to cut interest rates as aggressively or as quickly as originally thought. So a lot of things at play here. Again, it's a one-day reaction. I hope that people are not trading based on what they think is going to happen. We are going to know what happens. And importantly, if you're a long-term investor, you look through days and weeks, even administrations, and you are long-term in nature. You stick to your game plan. You don't mess around with it, and don't try to pick bottoms or tops.
Jill, the Federal Reserve will issue a decision on interest rates tomorrow. This is after that lackluster jobs report from October. Should Americans expect a cut?
I think that there is likely to be a 1/4 percentage point cut. Maybe they skip December, though, because the December meeting, that's one that could be a little bit live here. I think that most people thought that the Fed would like to do a 1/4 percentage point at a time. Maybe they won't. Maybe they're going to wait to see more data. We'll have to wait and see. Very interested in seeing the Jerome Powell press conference that will come after that decision. You know that all of our colleagues are going to be peppering the Federal Reserve chair about a lot of things around tariffs, a lot of things around the election, and maybe even his own job, because President-elect Trump has said that he would dump Jerome Powell as the chair of the Federal Reserve at the next chance possible.
Jill Schlesinger, thank you so much for your expertise this afternoon. We appreciate it.
And of course, we are watching live images on our screen from the quad at Howard University, where Vice President Harris has invited students, faculty, and staff back to address the nation shortly. We are expecting those remarks. Remember, they were expecting to hear from her last night. That didn't happen. Instead, we heard from one of her campaign advisors who at the time said that they held out hope for a path. And we know that in the early hours of the morning, that path dwindled. We are going to take a quick break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script. Yeah, boy!
It's gonna be a ride. Sunshine it down.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
How fast do you think you were going?
195 miles an hour. This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original, 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and constantly curious. I want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter. Information is the currency of democracy, and that's what we bring to the table every Sunday.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights
What a finish at the final round of play.
and in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. This is a live look at Howard University in Washington, D.C., the alma mater of Vice President Kamala Harris. She's set to speak for the first time since her election loss in just a few minutes. We will, of course, bring you there live as soon as she steps up to the podium.
Since CBS News projects that Republicans have taken control of the Senate after flipping several key seats, we wanted to take a look at what kind of legislation a Republican-controlled Senate would prioritize.
But first, let's break down the results so far. So as of right now, Republicans have 52 seats after defeating 3 Democratic incumbents. Democrats have 42 seats, and CBS News has not yet projected the results of 6 House races.
Meanwhile, control of the House is still up for grabs as we await results in several of those races. As of now, neither Republicans nor Democrats have secured a majority.
And for more, we want to bring in CBS News political reporter Hunter Woodall. He joins us here in Studio 57. So, Hunter, how significant is this Senate flip for the Republicans? Were any of these races in particular surprising to you?
Well, I mean, the Senate was one of those things where Democrats always had a tough map. We saw this, they were defending so many seats in difficult places, red states, Montana, West Virginia. We thought those were likely to flip, West Virginia especially. But losing in Ohio, that was a big setback for Democrats. And as you saw the night go on, the fact that they were having so many struggles in these battleground states, it looks like we're projecting, obviously, Democrats winning the Michigan Senate race, the Wisconsin Senate race. Democrats can breathe a sigh of relief there, but it's, they might still lose the Nevada Senate race. This has been a tough map for them.
So that said, what agenda do you think Congress will focus on, given the new Senate Republican majority, and if they end up flipping or keeping the House as well?
I think what you're going to see is, this is a much more friendly GOP for Trump than he had when he came into office in early 2017. This is a GOP very much molded in his image. When we saw what happened in 2017, this is very much almost like, okay, they're trying to work together at a time where they didn't really get along, congressional Republicans and Trump. This is Trump's party very much now, and there's so many of his allies in Congress, not just, in different roles, but in influential roles. And that's going to be a big plus for Trump as he tries to implement his agenda.
Do you see that synergy between Trump, the rest of the Republican Party in these Congress races that we've yet to call? Do you see that as being the deciding factor? Where do you think those races stand right now in terms of the Republicans getting control of the House?
Absolutely. And it's fascinating when you look at we haven't called races or projected for races in Arizona and California. And in 2 of those races, there are Republicans who objected to certifying the 2020 presidential election. Those are key Trump allies. They're in competitive races. They've already proven that they've sided with the president, former President Trump, President-elect Trump, in a major moment. They're likely to do so again.
Hunter Woodall, always appreciate you. Good to see you in New York.
Thank you.
This election marked the first time Americans voted for president since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, and abortion access was on the ballot in 10 states. 7 states approved some kind of abortion rights amendments, including Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, and Montana. Voters in Nevada approved an amendment, but it will need to pass again in 2026 for it to take effect. And Missouri voters cleared the path to undo its restrictive ban. Meanwhile, Florida, Nebraska, and South Dakota failed to pass measures that would protect access to the procedure.
We once again just want to let you know we are awaiting the arrival of Vice President Harris at the podium at Howard University in D.C. As soon as she steps up to the microphone, we will bring that to you live. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows
We need to step up and help them.
and a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
This is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
to find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back. Once again, this is a live look at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Vice President Harris set to speak in a matter of minutes for the first time after her election loss in, just a few minutes. We're going to bring you her remarks live as soon as she steps up to the podium. We'll bring you there. You heard Nydia earlier say that the campaign's been mostly quiet since last night, so we're not really sure the content of her remarks and what they will be.
And we know the reporting from those on the ground at Howard last night that the mood was very somber, particularly after people who had been gathering found out that the vice president wouldn't be making remarks. I think one of the interesting storylines that we'll be continuing to speak about for the days and weeks to come is this split ticket phenomenon that has happened across the country in many areas where people elected a Democrat but still chose Trump. For example, Michigan was just called for Alyssa Slotkin for Senate. We know that Michigan went to Trump. And so in her remarks, we don't have a keen idea on exactly what she will talk about, but we do know from the readout between her and President Trump in which she called to concede that there was a focus on unity and bringing the country together.
Yes, we do know, just to remind our audience, that former President Trump and now President-elect Trump has spoken to Vice President Kamala Harris, who called the former president to concede the race. The focus of that conversation was on unity for all Americans. It was not a long conversation, we were told, but one that focused, again, on the future and uniting Americans going forward as President-elect Trump won decisively across the country, flipping what's known as the blue wall. And the results of last night's election coming quicker than many of us anticipated. So in the hours since Donald Trump clinched the presidency, the Democrats are reassessing their party's future, trying to figure out what may have gone wrong.
Vice President Harris's campaign advisor weighed in on social media. He wrote in part, quote, "We dug out of a deep hole, but not enough."
Maura Gillespie joins us here in Studio 57 for more analysis. Maura is a Republican strategist, former advisor to House Speaker John Boehner and Representative Adam Kinzinger. She's also the founder of communications firm Blue Stack Strategies. And Jaime is a Democratic strategist, the former director for DNC Chair Jamie Harrison. He's currently the principal at communications firm Cornerstone.
Thank you both for being here. Jaime, let's start with you first. This deep hole that David Plouffe is talking about, I mean, what does that mean? Is that sort of indicative of blaming Biden a little bit, that there was a hole that she had to dig out of because he dropped out in July with only 100 and some days left?
Yeah. Lizzie, I don't think it's about blaming Joe Biden directly, but I think the reality is, when we look at those numbers, when Kamala Harris became the nominee, Joe Biden at the time was trailing Donald Trump very badly. And so for a lot of Democrats, Kamala Harris brought the joy back.
Sorry, Jaime. Here we go to a CBS News special report.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell, and we are coming on the air as we are about to hear from Vice President Kamala Harris. See her now walking to the stage. She had hoped to become the country's first female president by delivering a victory speech at her alma mater. Now that is a speech of defeat, coming just 12 hours after Donald Trump declared victory. Trump cruised to a resounding victory over Harris. They had to have spoken on the phone. We are told that the vice president conceding and that it was a conciliatory call. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let me say, and I love you back. And I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. And to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all. Look, I am so proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it, Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And we did it with the knowledge that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Now, I know Folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation, the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do. We will never give up the fight to protect our schools and our streets from gun violence. And America, we will never give up the fight for our democracy, for the rule of law, for equal justice, and for the sacred idea that every one of us, no matter who we are or where we start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be respected and upheld. And we will continue to wage this fight in the voting booth, in the courts, and in the public square. And we will also wage it in quieter ways, in how we live our lives, by treating one another with kindness and respect, by looking in the face of a stranger and seeing a neighbor, by always using our strength to lift people up, to fight for the dignity that all people deserve. The fight for our freedom will take hard work, but like I always say, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And the fight for our country is always worth it. It is always worth it. To the young people who are watching, it is, I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
The first woman to become Vice President of the United States, who had hoped to crack the glass ceiling and become the 47th president, just now conceding at Howard University, her alma mater, beginning by saying, "My heart is full today, full of gratitude, full of resolve," but at the same time saying the light of America's promise will always burn bright as long as we never give up and as long as we keep fighting. You can see the vice president there, joined by her husband, Doug Emhoff. Want to bring in Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who's there at Howard University and has covered this campaign. And we hear once again Beyonce's Freedom in the background there. What else did we hear from the vice president just now, Nancy?
Well, Nora, we heard from this vice president an acknowledgement of the way that many of her supporters are feeling right now, which is that the United States is entering a dark time. She said, if we're going to be entering that dark time, let's be a billion points of light. Let's commit ourselves to service. Let's commit ourselves to acts of kindness. Let's find some good in the situation we now find ourselves in. And I have to tell you that what was striking here on the campus of Howard University, this crowd is filled not just with supporters, but with Howard students, many of whom were not invited in for what was supposed to be a victory party here last night, but were allowed to come and stand here in the yard and watch this speech today. And so to see the tears in the eyes of those students, some of whom were casting ballots for the very first time, some of whom believed that they were casting a vote for the woman who could be the first graduate of an HBCU to actually become president of the United States. To see the tears in their eyes today was really moving and really sobering. The vice president said that she had spoken to former President Trump this afternoon, and that she talked about the importance of unity. And actually, the former president put out a statement acknowledging that and extending a rare olive branch to her and complimenting her on the tenacious race that she ran over the past 107 days, Nora.
And Nancy, we also heard from Vice President's campaign manager with a similar theme that we just heard from the Vice President. While she said, "While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fuels this." What's behind that continued fight?
Well, that memo that you're referring to from the campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, thanked campaign aides and volunteers, but it ended with a very pointed phrase, Nora, and I'll just read it to you. She said that the work of protecting Americans from the impacts of a Trump presidency starts now. And basically, that was a call to arms for Kamala Harris supporters, for Democrats more broadly. We may have won this fight, but there are more fights to come. They're very concerned about what Trump might try to do when it comes to health care, when it comes to mass deportations. And they recognize that there are more fights to come, fights that are only going to become more difficult for Democrats as they lose control of the Senate and are poised to potentially stay in the minority in the House as well, giving Republicans a trifecta of the White House, the House, and the Senate.
Nancy Cortez, thank you. I want to bring in Robert Costa to talk about Donald Trump, who with a populist revolt has won a decisive victory, not only perhaps in the Electoral College, but the popular vote as well. Some are calling this the biggest shift to the right in our country since Ronald Reagan's victory in 1980. What are you hearing from the Trump team today? His spokesman offered a conciliatory note to the vice president, but what happens next?
Well, the Trump campaign was certainly populist in spirit. They're confronting now in Vice President Harris an opponent who has conceded this election, and I've covered her since she was in the U.S. Senate. And when I speak to her confidants and her friends, I say, who is she? What is she about? And they say she is a lawyer. At the end of the day, she believes in the rule of law, in constitutional order. And you see in her tone, in her speech today, not some kind of populist fervor. Yes, she talked about galvanizing Democrats and moving forward with their head held high. But you see someone who's steady, committed to the peaceful transfer of power, urging all Americans to accept the election results. And when I talk to the Trump campaign, they don't see in Vice President Harris someone they want to fight. They see someone to a point in terms of her constitutional office, someone to be respected. Now, how they handle her in the coming days, how they handle President Biden, who knows? But she is projecting herself today as a serious figure on the American scene and how she's handling this devastating defeat with this speech. And it will be very intriguing to me as a reporter to watch how will the Trump campaign handle her showing grace in this moment. Will they pull back some of their usual political attacks?
Well, if the last 3 months are any guide, I imagine that we'll quickly go back to some of the very personal ad hominem attacks that characterized this race. As you know, Donald Trump had called her low IQ, and there were lots of back and forth between the two of them. I want to ask you, John Dickerson, because you spent a lot of the evening taking a look at the exit polls, and I think people want to know, what does this say about America? This is now Trump's America for some people. In the last 11 of 13 elections, people have voted for change. The exit polls show 73% of voters thought that Trump was more likely to bring about change.
Yeah. Can I just do one quick remark on what Harris said? A couple of things. One, it's not a throwaway line when she says we must accept the results of this election. That would be in normal traditional American politics, just something you say, you move on. It got applause. She lingered on it. That's obviously still making those distinctions with Donald Trump. And there was also some self-help in here. We wage this campaign in quieter ways, in the ways we treat each other as individuals. That's also implicit in that as a criticism of Donald Trump. It felt very much like Ted Kennedy's speech at the 1980 convention when he lost, which is the hope still lives and the dream shall never die, which is a kind of formula for a Democratic concession speech, giving everybody something to fight for in the future. What this election was about, to your question in the exit polls, it was an election that changed. Donald Trump was able to appeal to parts of what were the traditional Democratic coalition by making a case about the economy, particularly to people at the lower end of the economic scale. But so what Democrats used to think were ironclad separations on race, he broke through those with Latino voters. He didn't do it so much with black voters. And he was able to hold on to his own voters. Kamala Harris, by contrast, was not able to do as well with women voters as she had hoped. And I think at the end of the day, what Donald Trump's success and the success of other Republican candidates up and down the line is that there was a group of voters out there who felt unseen, unheard during the economic crisis, but also when you listen to J.D. Vance's speech at the convention, they felt unheard and unseen going back to the financial crisis of 2007, 2009, and back to the wars after 9/11. And we should throw COVID in there, too. And so that's and here we have the exit polls showing how it actually happened. There you see the victory among Latino voters. Donald Trump doing better than in 2020. He did well with young voters. This is the Democratic coalition. Most important number there is at the bottom. Women, 53% turned out for Kamala Harris. It was 57% for Joe Biden, and that's really the most important part of the race, that not turning out those women as part of her coalition.
I want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns. She is with the president-elect Donald Trump in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Caitlin, what are we hearing about potential presidential transition plans?
Yeah, that's right, Nora. This team is already getting to work, working on that transition. Just the former president and president-elect now is just a couple of miles away from here at his resort in Mar-a-Lago. Today, he has been taking calls from world leaders. He had a 25-minute phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron, and they talked about a lot of different issues according to the readout. And most importantly, of course, the issue of Ukraine will be center stage of some of those key relationships with foreign leaders. In terms of the transition, it's notable that Trump's two sons, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, are among those leading this transition team. This has been a family affair, this campaign, from the beginning, and will continue to be through the transition. Also leading that transition is Linda McMahon, the former CEO of WWE Wrestling, and also served as the in his cabinet before, and Howard Lutnick, who is a close friend of Trump and a former CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, leading that transition. But Nora, we're really looking at not only all the jobs that have to be filled, but specifically his cabinet. He's mused about a role for RFK Jr. as someone who could be involved in health policy, for example. But remember, all of the criticisms that came for Donald Trump from former members of his cabinet in his administration were kind of key centerpiece, center stage of this campaign. So he has noted that he will pick people differently than he has before. So keeping an eye on that. But this is a team getting prepared to go to Washington. And also, as Donald Trump mentioned in his acceptance speech last night, feeling like they have a mandate for governing. Not only their defeat in the Electoral College, they're also on track for a narrow win in the popular vote. And they're also going to come to Washington with a Senate majority, and we're keeping an eye on the House majority as well. So this is a former president, now president-elect, feeling like he has a mandate and broad Republican support in Congress. Nora.
Excellent reporting there, Caitlin Huey-Burns in West Palm Beach. Want to turn to our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe. And that is an important point, that he will see this election as a mandate. It was a resounding victory for him. And then he will have that majority in the Senate. So he will have some leeway about who he puts in his cabinet.
Not only who he puts in his cabinet, but potentially who he can stack the Supreme Court with. Should some of the older justices decide to retire, can fill the federal judiciary as well across the country, the appeals and district court level. It gives him almost total control of the federal government, and especially its personnel. There's a few things going on in Washington and across the country we should reflect on. First of all, we know now at the Justice Department there are active discussions about starting to wind down some of those investigations and the cases involving him. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor's office, in discussions with the Attorney General about winding down the election-related allegations. The classified documents case was already dismissed. We'll see if they can do that by the inauguration. The other thing we've picked up on today, Democratic governors across the country in big blue states, Midwestern, Southwestern states, many of whom have experience working with the first Trump administration during the pandemic, are in active discussions today about how to, as they put it, Trump-proof their states and prepare for big changes, ongoing changes in women's reproductive health, immigration policy, environmental regulations, and how the federal government will regulate industry and other aspects of society. These are governors like Illinois' J.B. Pritzker, Colorado's Jared Polis, Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, who were all in those meetings with him back in the day about the pandemic, and then had to band together to deal with some of the relief because they believed the federal government wasn't moving fast enough. The other thing, if you were hearing that speech and you thought to yourself, that kind of sounds like the beginning of a 2028 campaign, some Democrats I've already heard from say, yeah, that did sound a little bit like that. But they said, there'll be at least 20 other Democrats who want to run as well. She will not have the field to herself if she so chooses to go down that road.
That's right. The Vice President Kamala Harris conceding the race, she said today, but not the fight. Donald Trump, in his remarks last night, calling the MAGA movement the greatest political movement of all time, and saying that he will bring about the golden age of America. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news. And then tonight, we'll have a full wrap-up on the CBS Evening News. We've got an hour-long show tonight, so we hope you'll join us. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Norah O'Donnell.
And you've been watching a CBS News Special Report. Vice President Harris delivered her concession speech following former President Trump's win of the presidency last night.
She told a crowd of supporters she was proud of the campaign she ran. Harris also urged her supporters to keep fighting. Here's part of that.
While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people.
CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is still there after the vice president's remarks. Nancy, the vice president started her remarks saying the light of America's promise will always burn bright, reminiscent of her speech the night before Election Day. She also said, quoted an adage, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. What stood out to you about the speech?
Well, it almost seemed like a bit of a therapy session for not just the Democratic supporters who were here in the yard, as it's known, at Howard University, but for Democrats across the nation who are shocked and devastated today, who thought that Kamala Harris was going to become the first female president of the United States. She told them, yes, the outcome is not what we wanted, but I'm so proud of the race we ran, the way we ran it. She said it is not the time for despair. And she mentioned, as you noted, that there are many people who feel that the nation is now entering a dark time, but she urged her supporters to find some light in the darkness, if that's how they feel, through service, through becoming politically active, or even just being kind to one another.
Nancy Cordes, thank you so much. Let's bring in our political panel, Jaime Moore and Maura Gillespie. Jaime is a Democratic strategist who served as the director of the Office for DNC Chair Jamie Harrison. Maura previously served as an advisor to former Republican House Speaker John Boehner and former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Thank you both for being here so much. Maura, the vice president talked about there being a peaceful transfer of power. We heard John Dickerson say, you know, in ages past, that would sort of be a throwaway line. She lingered on it. What did you make of her remarks?
That was an important point to make to people, is just to remind them what happened 4 years ago when we didn't have a peaceful transfer of power. And again, I think that was a positive message to remind them that, because again, you know, the country was so divided. If you talk to people before the election, so many people were afraid of the outcome, whether you talk to a Trump supporter or a Harris supporter. They were so afraid of what the outcome was going to be. And so to bring it back to the fact that we are a country that will survive this moment, no matter if you wanted her to win or wanted her to lose, we'll survive this moment. We will continue on. Our democracy will continue because we do have adults in the room here who are going to give the peaceful transfer of power, who are going to help during a transition. And reminding the American people that they're going to do that, I think was honestly top notch.
And Jaime, you mentioned to us on the set as we were watching that the speech that Vice President Harris gave reminded you of one that Hillary Clinton made. What were some of the similarities there?
Yeah, Doug, and look, I worked for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And so last night was very tough for a lot of us, and this morning's been very tough for us. But Hillary Clinton gave a speech the Friday after the election in 2016 that was two things. One, to assure us as campaign staffers that, like Kamala Harris said, life goes on, we can pick up ourselves and we keep going. And then secondly, she felt very, very strongly about making sure people understood that every 4 years this happens. And it doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump or if it's Bill Clinton or if it's Barack Obama. We've got to have this change of power. And when you're in this fight, it's okay to lose sometimes, but you got to figure out how to pick yourself back up, put the pieces back together, and move forward. I think that's what Kamala did today.
And real quick, you did not see that speech as setting up for a 2028 run.
No, I don't think so, Lindsay. I think this is too. Look, Vice President Harris ran a really great campaign. I'm very proud of her, and I'm proud to call her a friend. I think she was tremendous. But it's too soon to say. We have some fantastic candidates who will emerge in 2027 and 2028. A bunch of governors, a bunch of members of Congress, a bunch of senators, mayors. And so I think it's too soon to say the vice president's going to prepare to run again. And I don't think that's fair for our party to say that right now.
Maura, were you struck by just the detail with which Vice President Harris went into the importance of a transition of power, as if almost to use the Hillary Clinton, they go low, we go high? And by not mentioning what she was really referencing, she made sort of a grander point, as John Dickerson pointed out, that needed to be made.
I just think it was to kind of quell the concerns that so many people have. Again, the emotions were so high going into Election Day. Fear was one of the prominent things that was being played upon during this entire election cycle. And so to try and remind people that that's not going to change, that we are going to move on, and the transfer of power is important to our democracy.
Jaime Moore, Maura Gillespie, thank you both so much for being here. We appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break, and you can join us at the top of the hour for a special edition of America Decides.
You're watching CBS News 24/7.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the